So even though, strangely enough, I'm actually really quite shocked that this was the number 2 rated question, I'm going to deal with it first. Because it's certainly the one that seems to be on most people's minds. So Brian D. Kane asks, asks, response to the outrageously outrageous comments, according to some liberals, that you made last Saturday in Texas regarding shooting Californians. Yeah, I do. I actually do have a few remarks about that. First of all, I'm going to start by showing you my favorite quote of all time by my favorite humorist of all time. So here we go. For those of you who may be dealing with a very low-resolution screen, it's a picture of Mark Twain as a young man about the time he made the quote, and he says, "I thoroughly disapprove of duels. If a man should challenge me, I would take him kindly and forgivingly by the hand and lead him to a quiet place and kill him." Obviously a call for murder on the part of Mark Twain here. This is really the root of the issue. For those of you who are not up on current events, I gave a speech at an event in Texas. It wasn't a fundraiser for Ted Cruz, just so happens that Ted Cruz was there. And I opened the speech by saying, these are pretty much verbatim quote. I opened the speech by saying, hey everybody, how are you? I just flew in from Los Angeles, and I can't tell you how great it is to be back in the United States of America. I grew up in America as a boy. It's a real pleasure to be home. Everybody laughed and applauded and cheered. So for people to take seriously what I said afterwards, they have to start by assuming that we're going to take seriously the idea that I don't believe that California is a member of the United States of America. When you start a speech with a statement like that, you're setting the stage, and you're setting a stage for a kind of rhetorical device. And you would think that the left, with their love of rhetorical sophistication, how smart they all are, you'd think they'd be a little more familiar with this. So let's just go right to Wikipedia, that unimpeachable source, but it happened to have a pretty good case here. And let's look up a word on Wikipedia, which I'm now going to read to you verbatim as it was copied from the Wikipedia page. And the word is hyperbole. Hyperbole, from the Greek, means exaggeration. It's the use of exaggeration as a rhetorical device or figure of speech. It may be used to evoke strong feelings or to create a strong impression, but it is not meant to be taken literally. Hyperboles are exaggerations to create emphasis or effect. As a literary device, hyperbole is often used in poetry and is frequently encountered in casual speech. An example of hyperbole is, "The bag weighed a ton." Hyperbole makes the point that the bag was very heavy, although it probably does not weigh a ton. So, here's what happened. I start with this line saying, "Good to be in Texas. I grew up in America. Just flew from California. Great to be in America." And then I said, "Listen, I'm just going to give you Texans some advice, and I wouldn't trust this to the Highway Patrol or even the National Guard. You may have to do this personally. If you see cars coming in from California, if you see cars coming in from the west heading east on I-10, and they stop at rest areas or restaurants or something, that's fine. Just escort them out to the Louisiana side. But if you start to see them going into residential areas, open fire on them immediately. Don't take any chances at all. Just open fire. Shoot first, ask questions later. And in fact, I wouldn't trust it to small arms fire. If I were you, I'd put mortar rounds down on that target. I'd use mortars. I wouldn't take any chances." Now, people were in there recording this. Some people recorded the thing. I could tell who they were, by the way, because everybody in the room was roaring with laughter, except for these two people who had a very serious expression on their face. And I remember thinking, oh, I guess these people are from the other team. So what happened was, the first iteration was, it's interesting how this works, because you really need to understand how this works. The first iteration of my call for genocide against Californians, against people in general, calling for the massacre of millions of people, was this. The first story said, conservative blogger jokingly advises people to open fire on people with California plates. And it included the video, and then there was a block quote. But then the next time it got picked up, either by Daily Kos or Talking Points memo, The jokingly was removed from the headline, and the block quote was there, and eventually the video wasn't there. So all you get is a block quote. You don't get the context, you don't get the people laughing, you don't get anything. So when people say to me, well, what's your response to this? My response is very simple. It is utterly, utterly, utterly inconceivable to me that anybody would take this seriously. And it goes a long way to talking about the mindset of the left to believe that people could take this seriously. They said, oh, and people laughed because, why would people laugh? You know, if you make a racist comment in front of a racist group, if you make a horrible derogatory comment about Jews or blacks in front of a Aryan Nation crowd, they don't laugh. They mumble in agreement. They don't laugh out loud. They mumble in agreement. Hyperbole is designed to take something to such a ridiculous level that it expresses the emotion behind it. And the emotion behind it is Californians are messing up Texas, and they are. And they're messing up Oregon, and they're messing up Idaho, and they're messing up Colorado, and they're messing up Nevada, and they're messing up everywhere. If I'd made that same joke in Oregon, if I'd made it in Colorado, if I'd made it in Idaho, would have gotten the same laugh. It would have gotten the same laugh because people know it's true. And it would have gotten a laugh because it's a joke. Because it's a joke. So, there are many things to say about the fallout of this. Here's the first thing I want to say. For me to apologize for this would be for me to say that there was some chance that somebody could take this seriously. It's utterly inconceivable to me. And when this thing happened, I was literally flabbergasted, and it's only when it sank in on me that that's how the left really does view us, you know. You want to talk about incitement to violence. The left and the demagogues and the progressives have been making conservatives and Tea Party people into these crazy lunatics who at a drop of a hat can open fire. Every time there's a shooting, every time there's a bombing, they blame the Tea Party. They actually believe this. It's never the Tea Party. Sometimes it's leftists. Sometimes it's moderates. Never Tea Party people. And by the way, just so we're crystal clear on this, it doesn't matter if they're all leftists. It doesn't mean that the leftist philosophy is responsible for this. So the fact that people could believe that I actually meant it, and the fact that people could believe that the people in the audience actually basically thought I was serious is an indication of how horrifically brainwashed these people are. It's just astonishing to me, really. So that's one level. The second level, the much more realistic level, of course, is that during the course of that 25-minute speech, I talked about immigration, I talked about guns, I talked about spending, I talked about projection of strength, I talked about all kinds of things. And guess what? None of that was picked up. I wonder why. I wonder why none of that, all of which is offensive to the progressives and everything they say. Why didn't they comment on anything of the substance of the speech I made? Why did they have to take this stuff and make this into an issue? Because it's not an issue, because there's not a person in the world that felt this was serious. But now I'd like to get to the main point about this, because this really is the issue here, in my opinion. When people say to me, for example, I'm kind of afraid to fly. I say, you want to go for an airplane ride in the small airplane? And some of them will say, I'm kind of afraid to fly. And my first response is usually to say, hey, I don't blame you. I don't ever go up there without a couple of quick stiff belts. You could get hurt up there. Does that mean I'm advocating pilots flying drunk? Does it mean that I fly drunk? Does anybody believe this? Anybody believe this? But let's get to the point. Here's the point. My theory of people and your theory of people, I would imagine, the conservative theory of people, is that we are individuals who have our own individual will and have our own individual actions, and we are responsible for our actions. The left's theory of people is that human beings, human individuals, are automatons that are wound up, that are not responsible for what they do. They're completely at the mercy of external forces. And so if somebody says something that outrages them, they just get ginned up and go out and shoot people, then that's the fault of the person that made the statement rather than the person who actually pulled the trigger. I utterly reject this viewpoint. And if you think about what the left is basically saying with this outrage, when I make a joke about something like this, and something that is so obviously a joke, it's so obviously a joke. What they're really saying is this. If they're really saying that by me saying this, somebody could go off and actually do this, then the end result of this philosophy is very simple. That means that anything you say in this country, anything you say, and forget about public figures, anything that comes out of your mouth that could be interpreted by the craziest person in the world, the craziest person in the country, as incentive to go out and commit a crime, then you are responsible for. That's ultimately what it's saying. I was at my Aunt Marty's 90th birthday party back in July, and I have a cousin who's a young man, and he's an extremely, extremely progressive guy. And he mentioned out loud he thought that the Republicans and conservatives had screwed up Time magazine. Now, if somebody at that party sitting around the fire had thought, yeah, the Republicans did screw up Time magazine, and then went up and shot up Time magazine, is that my cousin's fault? And if it is my cousin's fault, then who can say anything in this country? Who can say anything? Who can say anything? No one can say anything. If the standards for your ability to speak or have an opinion or make a joke or anything else is the possibility that the craziest person in the country might act upon what you are saying, then no one can say anything. And that's kind of exactly what they want. They don't want anyone to say anything. And forget about left and right, for example. Do you really want to live in a world? Do you really want to live in a world where if one person objects to a billboard, that billboard has to come down? If one person makes a complaint about an ad campaign, that ad campaign has to come down? Do you want to live in a world where the most outraged, professionally outraged people can, simply by objecting to something, cause you to be quiet and shut up? That's what they want. I'm not going to give it to them. I'm sorry. I'm not going to give it to them. I'm certainly not going to apologize, and I'm certainly not going to go much further than this. It's extremely, extremely clear to me what's going on. This is simply an attempt to suppress my speech, and I think what really drives it, frankly, is ultimately you can criticize the left and you can argue with the left and you can fight the left politically, but the one thing that these people, with their unearned moral superiority and their sense of intellectual superiority, the one thing that they cannot stand is to be mocked. They can't stand it. They cannot bear to be mocked. And that's what I was doing. I was mocking them. So, I don't know what to tell you. Other than that, that's pretty much my position on it. And I utterly reject this idea because, listen, of all the people out there who should be worried about the kind of criticism that they leveled against me, it's in fact the left. Because if by me saying this is incitement to murder, and I've been accused of that by scores of people personally, and hundreds of thousands of people probably think it. If I make a joke about this, that's so obviously a joke and people just roar with laughter, if people take that seriously and assume that I'm responsible for it, let's just say somebody did it. Let's just say somebody came out and did it, and I'm responsible for this. What does that mean? What that means is that the Columbine shooting with those two guys who were enormously influenced by the Matrix, they were part of the black trench coat mafia, all the weapons and all the reloads and all that other stuff. That means that the Wachowski brothers and Keanu Reeves are personally, legally responsible for the Columbine shooting. And it means that all of the violence in these, mostly in these urban neighborhoods, are the result of Kanye West and Jay-Z. They're personally responsible. All of the rap videos that talk about all of these popping caps on people, they are responsible for the murder rate if you follow this to its conclusion. Does the left really want that? Do people like Matt Damon who make a living shooting people with guns, do they really want to accept personal responsibility for the fact that they're in a movie where a guy uses a weapon and that caused some guy to shoot up a school? Is that what they want? I don't believe that for a second. I believe people make individual choices. They are individuals. They have individual choices. They make their choices and they assume responsibility for their actions. So that's my position on it. And if you want to look up hyperbole, you can. And I know why they did it. And you know why they did it. And it's not going to work. At least it's not going to work with me. So that's about all I want to say about that.